The air was filled with music and laughter, a perfect backdrop to what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. My name is Linda, and I stood there in my white gown, feeling like a princess. But that fleeting sense of joy shattered in an instant. Linda, dear, could you come here for a moment? My mother-in-law's voice, sharp and insistent, sliced through the cheerful atmosphere. I excused myself from a conversation with some friends and walked toward her, noting the rigid posture of her frame and the tightness of her smile. "What is it, Mrs. Dalton?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. "It's about the way you look at me, Linda. I know contempt when I see it. I'm your husband's mother, and I deserve respect, not disdain." Her words were laced with a venomous accusation, catching me off guard. "Mrs. Dalton, I assure you, you're mistaken. I have nothing but respect for you," I replied, confusion mounting inside me. "Respect?" she scoffed. "I've seen the way you roll your eyes, the sighs you give when I speak. Do you think I'm blind? You've turned my own son against me." Her voice rose, drawing the attention of nearby guests. "Mom, what's going on here?" Mark, my husband, appeared at my side, concern etched across his face. "Your wife," Mrs. Dalton spat, "she's been disrespectful to me, always looking down on me. And today, on your wedding day, she's been the worst." Mark turned to me, his brow furrowing, disbelief creeping into his expression. "Linda, is this true?" "No, it's not true," I said firmly, my heart pounding as a sense of injustice welled up inside me. "She's lying, Mark." "I'm your mother. Would I lie to you?" Mrs. Dalton sobbed, clutching Mark's arm, her tears adding an air of dramatic fragility. In that surreal moment, something snapped. Mark's hand rose, and before I could process what was happening, he struck me. The slap echoed through the room, followed by a stunned silence. I stood there, my cheek burning, as the guests stared in shock. "How could you?" I whispered, not to Mark, not to Mrs. Dalton, but to the universe, as if asking why it had allowed this moment to happen. "Linda, I didn't mean," Mark stammered, his anger dissipating into confusion and regret. "No," I interrupted, my voice steady though my emotions were in chaos. "You've shown me exactly who you are." I turned to the crowd, my back straight. "I'm sorry you had to witness this. Please enjoy the rest of the celebration. I need a moment alone." As I walked away, whispers buzzed behind me. But I held my head high. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. A plan began to take shape in my mind. A plan for justice, for reclaiming my power. I wouldn't let this humiliation go unanswered. Once I was in the privacy of the bridal suite, I allowed myself to crumble, tears spilling freely. But they weren't just tears of pain. They were also tears of determination. I wouldn't be a victim. I would be a victor. After that day, I knew I had to act. The first step was gathering undeniable evidence. I reached out to Mr. Grayson, a private investigator known for his discretion and effectiveness. "Mr. Grayson, I need your help," I said. "My husband Mark and his mother have been, let's say, less than kind." "Understood, Linda. What exactly are we looking for?" "Evidence of their behavior, anything that shows a pattern of emotional, financial, or even legal abuse." "Consider it done," he said. "I'll start with surveillance, background checks, and I'll dig into their pasts and finances." With my mission clear, I began recording every conversation I had with Mark and Mrs. Dalton. Every phone call, every encounter. I would collect all the proof I needed. In the midst of this turmoil, I found solace in my best friend, Sarah. She was the one anchor I had in a sea of chaos. "Sarah," I confided one evening, "I don't know how I'd get through this without you." She hugged me tightly, her voice steady and sure. "You don't have to go through this alone, Linda. I'm here for you always." "I'm collecting evidence. Mr. Grayson is helping too. I want to expose them for who they truly are," I said, determination lacing every word. "Be careful, Linda. They won't see this coming and they'll be furious," Sarah warned, her voice filled with concern. "I know, but I can't let them get away with it." As the weeks passed, the evidence piled up, calls where Mark's tone was aggressive and demeaning, financial records revealing his mother's grip on his assets, and some suspicious transactions that hinted at something darker. One evening, Sarah and I sat down, poring over the findings. "Look at this, Sarah. These bank statements. They're moving large sums of money. But to where? And these emails. They're planning something, but I can't figure out what." Sarah leaned in, her brow furrowed. "We need to connect the dots. This is more than emotional abuse. It's a web of lies and manipulation. The more I dig into this, the clearer it gets. Mark and his mother aren't just toxic. They're involved in something deeply unethical, maybe even illegal. Sarah's eyes widened as she looked at me. Linda, you think they're embezzling from Mark's company? I nodded, holding up a stack of incriminating documents. These records, they're undeniable. They've been siphoning funds for years. This is serious, Linda, Sarah whispered, her voice low with urgency. You need to be careful. If you expose this, they won't take it lightly. I know, I said, a steely resolve hardening inside me. But I can't back down. Not now. The evidence was overwhelming, not just of their cruelty, but their criminality. It was time to make a move. A plan began forming in my mind, clear and relentless. I'm going to expose them, I said, my voice calm but firm. Publicly. Sarah hesitated, worry clouding her expression. Linda, that's risky. But if anyone can do it, it's you. With Sarah by my side and the evidence in hand, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was no longer just about me, it was about justice. I needed to bring their deceit into the light for everyone to see, and so I made the decision. The next step was crucial, the grand reveal. I organized an event under the guise of a big announcement. I invited friends, family, and a few discreet media contacts. The venue was lavish, filled with people buzzing with anticipation. Thank you all for coming, I began, my voice steady, my demeanor calm despite the storm brewing inside me. Mark and Mrs. Dalton stood beside me, blissfully unaware of what was about to unfold. Linda, darling, we're so proud of you. Whatever the announcement, we support you, Mark said, his voice dripping with insincerity. I smiled, cold and unflinching. I've gathered you all here to share some important truths about my marriage and about the Dalton family. A murmur rippled through the crowd as I paused. Mark's mother shot me a sharp look, her face blanching. Truths? Mrs. Dalton's voice wavered, her mask of control starting to crack. What are you talking about, Linda? I'm talking about the abuse, the lies, and the illegal activities that have been happening behind the scenes. The room fell into stunned silence, the air thick with tension. Mark's face turned crimson, his eyes wide with fury. Linda, have you lost your mind? Quite the opposite, Mark. I've never been more clear. I gestured to the screen behind me, where a video began to play, one of our heated, abusive conversations caught on tape. The crowd gasped, the murmurs growing louder. Mrs. Dalton's face drained of color, her hands trembling. This is absurd. You can't do this. This is just the beginning. I continued, holding up a folder thick with incriminating documents. These records show financial irregularities, embezzlement, and fraud. Mark stepped forward, his voice a mix of plea and threat. Linda, you're ruining everything. No, I said calmly, I'm revealing the truth, a truth that everyone here needs to see. The media personnel began snapping pictures, cameras clicking as the drama unfolded. Mrs. Dalton's voice was barely a whisper now, her facade shattered. Please, Linda, let's discuss this privately. No, Mrs. Dalton, I said, my voice rising with finality. No more private discussions. The time for hiding is over. As I continued to reveal more, the reactions from the crowd varied: shock, disbelief, even disgust. Some guests shook their heads, while others whispered in astonishment. Mark and Mrs. Dalton stood frozen, their masks of respectability slipping away for good. This is my story, I said, my voice strong and unwavering. A story of surviving abuse and standing up against injustice. I refused to be a victim any longer. The event concluded in a whirlwind of activity. The media swarmed around, their questions rapid fire, while many guests approached me with words of support and admiration for my bravery. As I stepped down from the podium, a weight seemed to lift from my shoulders. I had done it. I had exposed Mark and Mrs. Dalton publicly, maintaining my composure and control. It was a moment of triumph, a moment where I reclaimed my power and voice. The courtroom was stark and imposing, a fitting arena for the final act of my journey. Sitting there, a mixture of nervousness and determination coursed through me. My lawyer sat beside me, exuding confidence, while across the room, Mark and Mrs. Dalton looked visibly unsettled. Your Honor, we are here to present the case against Mark and Mrs. Dalton, not just for divorce, but for years of emotional and financial abuse, my lawyer began, his voice firm and unshakable. Linda, you can't win this. You're going too far. Mark whispered across the room, desperation leaking into his voice. This isn't about winning, Mark, I replied softly but with steel in my tone. This is about justice. It's about showing the world who you really are. The trial proceeded, with my lawyer meticulously laying out every piece of evidence. The recordings, the financial documents, everything that painted the true picture of the life I had endured. The courtroom watched as the layers of deception unraveled. Your Honor, as you can see, the evidence is overwhelming. We seek not only a divorce but also legal action for the emotional and financial wrongs committed by the defendants, my lawyer concluded. This is all a misunderstanding. Linda is exaggerating. Mrs. Dalton's voice cracked, hollow even to her own ears. Exaggerating? I said, locking eyes with her. The evidence speaks for itself. You can't hide from the truth anymore. The judge, after reviewing the case, spoke. In light of the overwhelming evidence, I grant the divorce and order legal actions against Mark and Mrs. Dalton for their conduct. As the gavel struck, a wave of vindication washed over me. I had stood up to them, and I had won. With the legal battles behind me, I was finally free to begin a new chapter, one of healing, rebuilding, and peace. I found a small, tranquil place in the countryside, a stark contrast to the chaos of my old life. Sitting on the porch of my new home, a warm cup of tea in my hand, I looked out at the serene view before me. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, birds chirped in the distance, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a deep sense of peace. This was it, a new beginning, a life free from lies, manipulation, and pain. My journey hadn't been easy, but it was worth it. I had not only survived, I had triumphed. I found my strength, reclaimed my voice, and now I was finally free. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over the horizon, I smiled. The future was uncertain, but it was mine to shape, a future filled with hope, healing, and happiness. This was my story of triumph. The story of a woman who refused to be silenced, who stood tall against all odds. This was my closure. This was my victory. Do you believe Linda's decision to publicly expose and legally confront her husband and his mother was the best course of action? Could there have been another way to handle such a situation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story and want to see more, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more compelling narratives. Your support helps us bring more stories to life.